Let me just say, on a personal note, thank you so much, Howie, for that blast in the past, from the past. It's an invigorating that has actually lifted my spirit. That are that I have to confess, my threshold is so low for frustration, disappointment, disenchantment, expecting the worst, so that every little bit, like Howie's remembrance of what we might have done then, can lift up my spirit enough to be able to do this, hopefully, with some elegance as well as bite. This annual exercise is rooted in the context of human rights as a manifestation as well as a mechanism of democracy. CMFR has always understood press freedom not as belonging to the press or as a right of journalists, but that it is a right that belongs to citizens, to all who live in a democracy. The press provides them with a kind of news and information that empowers them as citizens with the capacity to participate in a public forum, to ask questions, to express their ideas, to think, to be critical, and finally to choose their leaders wisely, as without Democrat leaders, democracy falls apart. The collection of data that we're presenting to you this afternoon is still a work in progress, as we want to be able to finalize it in some form, but the stuff or the information that I will give you, I think is enough, good enough for you to begin thinking about the state of press freedom today. It has enabled FMFA to act, to do advocacy, to campaign, to consolidate the spirit of journalists wherever they may be, even those that do not agree with one another, that they belong to a pillar of democracy, that they are part of the fourth estate. We have hoped to be able to identify cases that demonstrate how easily human rights can be trampled on or trivialized by those in power. This year, we are presenting two levels of evaluation. First, what we do usually is related to the level and the nature of attacks and threats against press freedom based on consolidated data of both CMFR and the NUJP. So we have put together our cases and compared. Additionally, we present the map of space and time given to news and public affairs in the Philippine broadcast media. Why? Because it is news and public affairs that creates citizenship, and it is broadcast media that is now the primary source of political information. We all agree the dramatic decline of print as a medium for all the various reasons which I will not discuss anymore. This year, with hardly any news about the event, the Kapisanan ng Broadcaster ng Pilipinas, KBP, celebrated its golden jubilee, 50 years, when broadcast media evolved to become a prime source of political information and news for Filipinos. For good or for bad, radio and TV have sustained operations during periods of dramatic change. It was established during martial law as a mechanism for self-regulation while observing the terms of coverage set up by government. It was understood they would regulate themselves according to the framework of communication set up by the Marcos regime. So the KBP were on site to cover people power, events of February 1986, the shaky transition to democracy where we witnessed about 7 attempts again to bring down Corazon Aquino, the EDSA dos, which threw out the actor President Joseph Estrada, and more. This afternoon, we will focus on the present. Those of you who are here joining the exercise for the first time may have a lot of questions. We may not all be able to answer all the questions, but the fact that you are asking questions justifies the program. We begin, therefore, with a graph that present the nature of attacks and threats against press and journalists in the last 10 months. We have focused on the period after Ferdinand Marcos Jr. took office. Why? Because Duterte had done his damage, counting whatever cases there was. It will come out in our yearly reports, but I am not focusing on it anymore. Duterte's personal animosity, as everyone has said already, is or was contagious, as when he started insulting journalists, when he started using obscenities on the public stage against and at targeted media personalities, a lot of people thought that was the way to do. And public officials and other government agencies also followed suit. And we know from our reports how these increase each year, noting assaults, physical, verbal, digital, harassment, banning of journalists from public events, among many others. When Duterte resolved to end the communist insurgency, law enforcement agencies, through the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, or the NTF-LCAC, initiated more red tagging of media members and their organizations. Note, please, that as far as we have checked, there is no law that bans any ideology of any organization. Why? Because we have freedom of speech, we have freedom of thought. Media, however, is obliged to update its public and the people about the state of insurgency. But reporting on them and being in touch with them does not make reporters insurgents. And yet media and individual journalists have become highly vulnerable to such actions by law enforcement agencies. Also targeted are the NGOs which publish content related to their campaigns and advocacies. Indeed, military personnel have gone as far as raiding university libraries, saying this is subversive, this is communist, and we must pull them out, in direct attack of another important freedom that you should know about, academic freedom. President Marcos, on his side, has been amiable toward the press. His brief speech at the KBP Jubilee ceremony noted the low-ranking 157th the Philippines is in a ranking of countries in the Global Press Freedom Index. And yet, what did he say? He said he hoped to positively improve this ranking working with the KBP. As far as his words and his speeches, President Marcos seems to have turned the page on his predecessor's record. But actions speak louder than words. And there has been, at this point, no real visible action to prevent the kinds of attacks that made Duterte's regime as dark as it could ever be for the media and for democracy. The improvement, however, let's be optimistic, it shows that attacking journalists and the media and insulting them is no longer government's #1 priority. Let us look at the graphs. CMFR and NUJP recorded, and we are focusing on the 10 months, 75 attacks and threats against media workers from June 30, 2022 to April 30, 2023. 40 of the cases of intimidation include 31 cases of red tagging media members or news organizations, and 8 cases of surveillance. Why do we pull out surveillance? Because if you have not been yourself an object of surveillance, you don't know how that feels. That you are watched, that there is someone standing outside your office, that there is a car parked in front of your home. You don't know how that makes you feel until you have suffered it. We have 10 cases of libel and cyber libel involving 2 arrests and 1 conviction. In many democracies, libel is no longer criminal and can no longer throw a journalist into jail. There were 2 killings during the period. Ray Blanco on 18 September 2022 and Percy Lapid on 3 October 2022. This broadcaster criticized Duterte, continued to criticize Marcos and government actions which followed the media, and he was followed by countless Filipinos. The color elements were easy to follow, and therefore media followed it daily. After all, the procedure had already been featured in a movie where hired assassins in prison were taken out and were then given the liberty to kill. Police investigation has identified, indeed, in the real life investigation, that a ranking official is now the alleged mastermind. Including Lapid's case, 41 cases involved state agents. This, again, we have been tracking from the beginning, and we have been doing this since 1990. Yeah, that's how old I am. No denials. 41 cases now, when before only the military, and not even so many military, were involved in killings. State agents as perpetrators, 23 from national government, 12 from the police, 6 from local government. How dangerous can a world become for people who are doing this job? How much more killings? How much more danger and peril? With red tagging as the category with the highest number suggests that Marcos may not have yet departed from Duterte's custom of deploying law enforcement agents on all fronts, including the pandemic, remember? In fact, 76 exceeds the number of attacks and threats in any one year during the term of Duterte. Kinompare po namin dun sa mga ibang taon na tinignan namin yung total numbers, napakataas ng 76. Even compared to the yearly assaults that we received under the worst era ever. This suggests that Marcos has not pulled away from that pattern of showing state agents themselves actively going after the media. That, I could stop here actually, because that's sad enough. And we want to be optimistic. But we have to move into another level of media containment. I'm calling it containment for now. We may find a better term. We have scanned the media landscape, mapped the space and time given to news and public affairs to examine another aspect of control. These programs, after all, are what makes or enables citizenship, without which there is no real citizenship building in the media when you're only considering entertainment and recreation. We want citizens who can think. We want citizens who can evaluate. To observe the dramatic change in print, the pandemic caused numerous, and I'm just going back to the print space here to note that something that you don't pay much attention to because you live and study in the NCR, that community-based publications, one that I had cheered in a column when I was still a columnist that said this is the sign of real growth in the press, that the community press has now become a true and genuine market. Well, the pandemic kind of took care of that. One only has to pick up any broadsheet to know the diminished presence of print, and one has only to check what's available in your 7-Eleven or any other convenience store on a daily basis to know how much we have lost. So we are concentrating on television and the digital shift in delivering news. Television arrived in the Philippines in 1952. As a child, it was our magic box when we finally got one in our home. And into the third millennium had surged as a primary source, not just of entertainment, but it had become a major source, the most dynamic way, in fact, of getting your political stories. Even the spread of social media has not dislodged TV's primacy in the Philippine media landscape because social media still carries TV content. According to the Philippine Statistics Authority, in 2019, 97.5 households in the country have a TV set pa rin. And because advertising revenues pay for the service, Filipinos get all this free, as a matter of speaking. That medium has dominated Filipinos' consumption of news and information with the evening newscast and the nightly public affairs, unfortunately, a little too late for many who work. Of course, we know that more than anything else, Filipinos turn to television for entertainment. Ayaw na nilang makinig ng news. To be in the know, to be connected with celebrities, connected to the faces and personalities of noontime variety shows, soap operas, day or prime time. But the pandemic and the governance closure of the major broadcast network, ABS-CBN, caused the earth moved under my feet. Although, if you really listen to the lyrics of Carol, the earth moved for other reasons. The two combined to cause drastic changes in countries' TV viewing habits. First, during the pandemic, more people watched television. The rise of 24% in viewership from 3 and 31 minutes on to 4 hours and 22 minutes in May 2020. As the pandemic persisted, however, television production of programs also got affected. First, they lost the variety shows, which had to take in live audiences. They lost the capacity to send out production crews to shoot on location. Countless drama shows, etc., were no longer there. TV networks had to come up with new ways to create content, moving programs to online platforms. Networks such as GMA7 and TV5 strengthened their own streaming services, while ABS-CBN turned completely digital because digital is not contained or ruled by franchise. The closing down of ABS-CBN, if anybody still here thinks that there were real reasons for closing it down, forget it na. The Committee on Public Utility denied its application after it had operated and succeeded in its last 50-year franchise. It should have been routine, and yet it turned out to be a disaster, which all of you should simply accept and say and understand as abuse of state power. ABS-CBN had 143 broadcast stations nationwide in places where other channels did not want to go. Its closure was therefore a major blow to the industry, cut off communities where only ABS-CBN could give them free TV. That closure had another effect. It suggested to all the newsrooms, to the owners of the news enterprises, that this can happen to you too, huh? And that contained the impact, the impulse to get the stories, to look for stories, to search out the stories, and stay in a quiet, safe zone, except for the exceptions that my colleagues who have come up on stage have already called attention to. Another quick look. The entry of Manuel Villar is what happened after post-pandemic, and after the closure of ABS-CBN is the entry of another media mogul whose wife and whose son are two sitting senators. Manuel Villar is the owner of All TV, who won the franchise or got the assignment of ABS TV's channel's franchise. Does it have the capacity? Has it shown its capacity? Well, since February 6, 2023, it was launched in July 15, 2022, some of its programs were temporarily shelved due to unknown reasons, and its 19-hour programming has now been cut to 10 hours and 3 or 30 minutes. Meanwhile, ABS-CBN has been scrambling to get their programs on transmission through various different channels, among them the A2Z channel owned by the religious leader Eddie Villanueva, which operates in a number of key cities. It currently has A2Z, 22 broadcast stations nationwide, and ABS-CBN is now a block timer in these, as well as tried to pursue an agreement with TV5 that did not flourish because of the threat of getting more investigated. ABS-CBN has now become a content creator, according to its own TV head, Lauren Tidiogi, dealing more now or dishing out more entertainment than news. So it's not a very happy sight, at least not for press freedom. I hope you agree. CMFR did a quick scan of the NTC complete list of operating TV stations nationwide, and ABS-CBN is now currently airing in 49 broadcast stations nationwide, and this number is only 34.27% of the 143 stations prior to its closure. Meanwhile, GMA7 continues with 106 stations currently operating. Actually, the context of this reduction you must hold also with the understanding of how little news and information we actually are producing. The KBP members are not obliged anymore, as they were during martial law, to give primacy to news and information. The KBP now, in a free, supposedly free environment, ever since or post-martial law, has only required no 30 minutes of its programming time. So sometimes if you wonder how easily social media captures the public mind, this is one of the answers. We have never made news and information the main grid that it should be in a democracy. The time and space that no one touches, not even advertising. I will not go into more details. Let me just, unless Spencer, you think that I should. Okay, in in the circles, yes, you can see how small that portion is that provides in the NCR the amount of free TV. Of course, CNN is an exception because it is an all-news channel, as ANC would have been, right? Government PTV4 carries government information and news, much of which is, we will have to admit, propaganda. The three others that give out what is called political or news happen to be church-owned. And these include Kiboloy, the Iglesia ni Cristo, and Eddie Villanueva. Am I right? Yeah. All right. So, based on Kantar's media studies, the habits have also changed. TV viewership decreased from 94% in 2019 to 89% in 2022. That's relatively small. Online content, however, increased from 59% to 76%. Radio listening decreased slightly, but radio has kept steady. So these are the areas of hope. We can keep all of these areas alive if we think strategically, where will the active journalists want to show their wares? The internet has become democratic space for all sorts of content, catering to a wide variety of audience. And to reach the growing online demographic, print, radio, and television have created their own online versions, not only as a repository of previously published, but also as a platform of living or live original content. How are we doing in digital space? I am going to do this very, very quickly. The observation that I think I want to share with you, and this I'm really abbreviating what we have prepared because I want the round table to have enough time to hear out your question, is that while both the internet and the social media, do you? Yes. Both the internet and social media show wanting information. In social media, it is only the wanting news stories. Unfortunately, in the social media, journalists and news organizations come only on the 12th rank. Hindi nila kinukuha yung kanilang hinahanap na news stories doon sa mga mamamahayag na naturuan na kung paano gawin ang business ng news. So it's an ironic outcome. The reality, we need to kind of like go back there, change the framework, try and find ways of reaching these audiences that are apparently, or when they started, wanted to know about news. And they went elsewhere and got captured, and now they belong to the silos, which I, in my dismal outlook, can't see how we are going to get them out of there. But this is my concluding message. News must follow the audience. News must go where the people are. News must create the different ways of keeping it all interesting, making it more relevant making it more interesting because it is relevant. You have to touch base with your audience. You have to know about them. You have to connect with them. You have to make them part of the news and draw them in, just as they were seduced by social media providers, which unfortunately outran us when they went and used social media for governance purposes as well as for other fake purposes. The situation remains fluid, just as the music market seems now to create special audiences for record players, for LPs. Who knows what event, what technological brilliance is going to give us another miracle, another magic moment with technology that will somehow bring us to a level of engagement like nothing we have ever seen. And here in my 70th decade, late, I allow myself to dream. What we've done before, it was easier to do then. It is more difficult to do now. But you have more to prepare you for it. You have had the punishing experience without necessarily being imprisoned for it, without necessarily having to lose friends and colleagues in the battle. You might combine the greater hope with the cynical, skeptical, journalistic outlook to check whatever anyone of importance tells you, because that is the beginning of the lie. The office provides more amplification of the lie. And so covering government beats, covering public officials, with my due apologies to the university officials who are here, but who are still government officials. We must, in fact, call on the champions on the other side to join us, because we will be the leaders, or you will be the leaders of the future. Thank you very, very much for the attention that you have given me. And good.